Lorraine,
I'll move we accept the agenda as presented.
all in favor? Carried. Come on down.
Good afternoon.
I've lost my source again, but that's just, that's OBS. So let me just see if I can grab it real quick.
It's not getting any bigger.
Nope, sorry.
Okay. All right. Well, good afternoon. Hope you brought your reading glasses. Anyways, my name is Phil Dirks. I'm happy to be here on behalf of Metrics Group, Chartered Professional Accountants, to review the town's 2023 audited financial statements. So I will get right at it. So if I could go to the next slide, please. So I think you have in front of you a copy of the draft financial statements. All this information is coming out of that. Probably a little easier to follow along on this level, but just a word about our auditor's report. So what are we hired to do? We're hired to provide an opinion on the town's financial statements. What does that mean? We're seeking reasonable assurance whether the town's financial statements are materially misstated or free from material misstatement. In doing our work, we're guided by the auditing standards in Canada, which are referred to as Canadian auditing standards. So it's a long list of the auditor shall do this and shall do that. But at the end of the day, in our auditor's report, first paragraph, so opinion paragraph, states that the financial statements are in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards. So those are the standards that school boards, municipalities, hospitals, those types of organizations use in doing their financial reporting. So, from a auditor standpoint, that's as good as it's going to get. So we call that a clean opinion. So I'll leave it at that. If you were going to go back and look at last year's report, the only things that would have changed there is the dates. It was 2022, so now it's 2023. So anyway, if we can go to the next slide. So I'm just going to go through the statement of financial position. Just thought I'd lay out a summary here, first of all, before we look at the details. So on this page, you can see there's a couple of fairly significant changes from last year to financial assets and liabilities. So we'll talk about that. Down at the bottom, town has a accumulated surplus of $34.9 million. If you're following along in your own copy, I don't know what your page numbers are exactly, but it would be page 4 on your financial statements. So if we can go to the next slide, we'll get into a little bit of details. So a couple of things to note here under financial assets. So you can see quite a large spike in receivables. Other than that, nothing too unusual about cash balances. There's also a large reduction in land held for resale. So if we can go to the next slide. Now I'm looking in one of the notes, so you're probably better off just to look at the screen. I'm not telling you what to do, but a couple things to point out here. So you'll see receivables have increased from just over $1 million in 2022 to just over $7 million, almost $8 million at the end of 2023. So what is the difference there? One of the main things was the local improvement tax, top of the page, $4.4 million. Town Council passed a bylaw last year for local improvement tax on the Common Heartland Station project. So that's what that has to do with. That still needs to be collected, but it was passed in 2023, and accounting standards require that to be recorded in the year that the tax is passed. Other than that, you can see on the second line, trade and other went from 433,000 up to 2.5 million. So this is again way back at December 31st. So you did have some land sales that went through last year, and at that point there was $1.5 million still in receivables for the land sale. Total land sale was about 2.5 million, I believe, and we'll see that in a minute here. There's also some grants, Canadian Community Building Fund and MSI money that are included in that number. But the main reason for the increase there was the land sale, and I believe you've collected a lot of that money after December 31st, so that's good. So those are really the only significant changes. GST, goods and service tax, is up a little bit because you had a lot more capital activity last year, so that's why that is. And other than that, utilities and taxes are, pretty much similar to the year before. So if we could go to the next slide. A couple things to note here on liabilities. So if you're following along on in your financial statements, again, I'm on page 4. Town had some outstanding amounts, 2.4 million on its lines of credit at the end of the year. A couple things to note here, fluctuations from last year to this year. Accounts payable is up quite a bit there. There was some work with border paving holdbacks, 260,000. That's why that's quite a bit higher than last year. For the, if you were going to pick one item, that was the big item. Deferred revenue, 1.7 million there in the middle of the page. So that's primarily grants that the town has received but hasn't spent yet. So those will be restricted for various projects. So a couple of things there. Yeah, the Ag Society CFEP grant was $720,000 for the Memorial Park. There's some CCBF and MSI money that you haven't spent yet. Adds up to about 300,000. And so still some money from the Alberta Municipal Water Wastewater Program, 313,000. That was from a previous project. So those are the main things that are included in that line item. So that's cash that's in the bank that hasn't been spent yet. There's another one there on that page called asset retirement obligations. So I'm sure you've heard about that, or maybe you haven't. But last year there was a new accounting standard for asset retirement obligations. So the people that make the accounting rules felt it was appropriate for organizations, entities to record potential liabilities for retiring assets. So with most of our municipal clients and school board clients and so on, this had to do with asbestos in older buildings pre-1990-ish. There was asbestos in some of these buildings. So this $377,000 on the town's books now represents a potential obligation to clean up some of that, remediate some of that asbestos in various town buildings at some point down the road. Long-term debt. And just as an aside, asset retirement obligations, most of the municipalities that we're dealing with, they've got that on their books now too, so it's not just you. Long-term debt, you can see that's increased quite a bit. You did take out a $3.6 million debenture for the Heartland Common, Heartland Station projects, and then there was a $250,000 debenture for a grader. So that's why those went up, and we've confirmed those balances with the province. So those are debentures with the province. So total liabilities are $13.8 million. If we can go to the next slide. One of the items that's required by the Municipal Government Act and is included in the financial statements is the debt limits. So you can see here, this is disclosed in note 17 of the financial statements. You can see that the debt limit was $22 million, top of the page there in the left column. Less the total debt, left the town with about $11 million debt limit remaining. So you've used about 50% of your debt limit at the end of the year, and that's down from 64% last year. One of the things that drives that number is the debt limits based on revenue. So when your revenue goes up, as we add the local improvement tax and some of those land sales, the debt limit also increases. So just be aware of that. But right at this point in time, town is on side with its debt limits. Next slide, please. Just rounding out the statement of financial position. So there's, town has various non-financial assets. So primarily capital assets. There's some inventories there, primarily water meters that are on hand that haven't been put in yet. Capital assets though, last year, pretty big year for capital additions, $4 million roughly. 2.2 of that was basically on the project down the road there, bought a grader, skid steer, did some sidewalk work, all those kinds of things. So, you know, what we're concerned about is making sure that things that go into those accounts meet the definition of an asset. That's primarily what we're concerned about, but no issues there. So again, their total non-financial assets were $39.6 million. And just bear in mind that the capital asset number is not an indication of what you might be able to sell those assets for. That's what you paid for them, less amortization to date. So if we can go to the next slide, again, just wrapping up the statement of financial position, same slide I showed you at the beginning. You can see there kind of what I summarized with the increases in financial assets and liabilities. That led to the net debt being reduced by about $1 million. You know, net debt isn't necessarily anything to be too concerned about. That usually arises when a municipality is doing a lot of capital activity. But those funds will have to come from future revenue sources. Accumulated surplus at the bottom, $34.8 million. So if we go to the next slide, please, we can see the details on that. So the town's financial position here has increased or improved nicely from last year, primarily due to the local improvement tax there. So at the very first line, you can see the unrestricted surplus went from a deficit of $586,000 to a surplus of $4.2 million. Then there's some reserves, primarily money that has been received from the county under your recreation agreement for capital funding. And then equity and TCA, that's tangible capital assets. That's the same as equity and you have in your house. Value of those assets less the debt. So again, a nice improvement over last year. So if we could go to the next slide, we'll take a look at operating revenue. So if you're following along, I'm now on page 5. So a couple things to note here that I've highlighted in yellow. If you look at the very bottom, actual versus budget, you can see quite a big difference. So there's a couple things there that we'll talk about in a minute. Under sales and user charges, it's going to be the land sale again, but I'll show you a little bit of an analysis in a second here. And the local improvement tax was just over $4.5 million. The rest of the operating revenues are very close to budget. So really, when we come back to looking at that a little bit deeper level, that's what we're going to see is there's two reasons for that variance. If we can go to the next slide. Looking at operating expenses, again, there's a few items that I'll talk about in a little bit more detail on the next couple slides, but again has to do with the Heartland Common, Heartland Station, primarily accounting for that. But other than the items that I've highlighted in yellow, most of the town's expenses were at or very near budget last year from the operating standpoint. So again, I'll just circle back to that in a minute here. If we could go to the next slide. This was just rounding out the statement of operations. So we had an annual operating surplus of $2.6 million. So that was revenues less expenses. The budget was $585,000. So again, just bear with me for a minute here. We'll come back to that, why there was a difference there. It was fairly close to what you budgeted. Other revenue, government transfers for capital. Those are grants that primarily MSI Capital and Canadian Community Building Fund grants that are used for capital assets last year. So of the $4 million that the town spent on capital assets, $1 million of those were covered by various grants. So if you go to the next slide, unfortunately that's going to be real tough to see. I don't know if you have that in your package or not. Do you have it in your package? Okay, so I'm having a hard time seeing it actually. But if you look at the top of the page for starters, so this is going back to why do we have a budget variance in revenue. So Sales and user charges and local improvement taxes, you can see on the third column of numbers there, there's significant variances. Sales and user charges was $1.7 million over budget, and the local improvement tax was 4.4. So we had, in the middle of the page there, land sale, that was 2.6 million over in the actual. The budget was 810,000, so you actually had a budget variance of 1.8, second column from the right, and the actual variance was 1.7. So that explains why sales and user charges were over budget. And then the local improvement tax, again, there was no budget included for that, so that's why there's a difference there. So, other than that, the orange item, government transfers were a little bit higher than budget because you don't budget for the SALC and OH and S. Don't ask me to remember what those stand for again, but you don't budget for those revenues or expenses, so we'll see an offset for that in the bottom. So really, when all the smoke clears there, under the revenue section, there was a $6.3 million overage in revenues compared to budget, and way over on the side there, we explained 6.3 million of those as the land sales and the local improvements. So if you're wondering why there's those differences, that's why. And then if we look at the expenses, there's a few things there to note as well. So again, first line in expenses, you can see a $1.6 million overage in expenses compared to budget. So that was to do with the land sale. So the town had inventory of land. So when you sell lots, that has to be reduced for the lots that got sold, and that gets recorded as an expense. So there was $1.6 million of land cost of sales coming out of inventory that you've paid for in previous years. It's not non-cash this year, but that's why that line item is larger. So, you know, if you look at your land sales, the proceeds were 2.6 million. The costs were 1.6, so you netted about $1 million on that. Other than that, significant items, third line down, you can see there was $1 million variance there, expenses being over budget. So part of the work that was being done, what direction is that? South of town there, was for the province on the highway, which, you know, the town doesn't own that road. So some of those costs related to that were expensed, and that was about $1.1 million. So that's why there's a difference on that line item. And then there's an offsetting difference again in the orange area for the same as in revenue. And then right at the bottom, town doesn't budget for amortization, so that's why there's a difference there. So overall, expenses were about second line from the bottom in the third column, $4.2 million over budget. And over on the second column from the left, we explained why that was. 3 reasons: land sale, cost of sales, the Highway 28 portion that wasn't the town's asset, and amortization. So overall, you know, that takes us back to basically your $585,000 budget. So if you look at the very bottom there, we showed a difference to budget of $2 million, and the net impact of all that stuff I just described is about $2 million. So hopefully you can make sense of that. That was a little easier for me, but, you know, really just, again, land sales, local improvement tax, amortization, those are the 3 things that you need to kind of keep in the back of your head. So overall, you know, I think when you do a little bit of mathematical finagling there, you know, the town more or less did what it set out to do in the budget. On top of that, there was a few extra items, right? But anyway, overall, that was a good result. As other things to note, if we can just go to the next slide. Oh yeah, you can just keep pressing away there till it fills up. So, audit findings report, I think you also have a copy of that in your package. I'll just say a few words about that. There were no unusual accounting policies, practices, areas where the town makes estimates, amortization of assets. So if we're writing off an asset over 10 years, you know, it's greater, that's an estimate. Might not be perfect. Asset retirement obligations, like I mentioned, that's an estimate, again, based on some reports that the town received from consultants about asbestos in various areas. Corrected and uncorrected misstatements, there were a number of adjustments again this year during the audit, but after those were booked, No significant uncorrected misstatements were remaining. Did have some delays and so on during the audit completing things. There were some, extenuating circumstances maybe with some of personal issues and so on. But here we are, better late than never. So just keeping you apprised of that. And then we've also issued management letter. I think that's still being reviewed by Farrell and Monique, but you'd be, welcome to look at that once that's finished up. So overall, I think again, like I said, if we can just go to the next slide, when all the smoke cleared there, revenues and expenses, more or less, can get back to your original budget. You did improve your, overall financial position due to the land sale and then local improvement tax. So I think overall it's a positive outcome. But I'd be happy to answer any questions anybody has if there were any.
Council, if we can start from left to right and go through, give everyone an opportunity. Councilor Yusishin, do you have any questions?
I do, I just have to find the part again. Under the receivables, what is the line item for 5,000 allowance for doubtful accounts? What does that mean?
Oh, that's just in case there was anything in the tax accounts that was ultimately not likely to get collected. That number's been there for a number of years. It's not related to anything in specific. It's just, just in case.
I believe that was the only thing I saw related to the financials.
Councilor Berry.
If I've understood what is being presented, our current debt limit, or at least the debt limit as of the end of 2023, was around $20,000, or we had access to an additional $20 million as far as our debt limit was concerned.
Yeah, actually the debt limit, overall debt limit was 22 million roughly, but when you take away the town's debt, total debt, so debentures and the line of credits, there was about $11 million of debt limit remaining. So at that point in time, you could have borrowed another 11 million.
Okay, thank you.
Amber?
Yep, I have lots. Do you want me to do one at like mine and then go to the next counselor, or would you like me just to do all of them at the same time?
Go.
One? One at a time?
Go, all of them. Everybody gets their opportunity.
Okay, good. Then I will start with, Phil, what happens if the levies are assumptions, right? You know what I mean, like the levies that are applied to the commons, right? They are assumptions that we will eventually get, or estimations.
Well, if you're talking about the local improvement
Yeah,
levy,
pardon me,
that's
yeah.
a bylaw, yeah, and that will be, there's a 15-year repayment. I
Oh.
believe it was, is that correct? Yeah.
Okay, so so basically, we're carrying that until it's paid. What happens if it takes longer to get develop that area, get all the spots filled?
I don't know, actually, that might be a question for Farrell, because the bylaw states that it's supposed to be paid back in 15 years, so
Right.
whether or not it does or doesn't.
Mayor Deck, members of council, Councillor Harrison, it's based on a schedule that's presented in the local improvement bylaw that has annual payments that'll be charged against each of the owners in the land.
Okay, so it's guaranteed basically to be paid back within 15 years, is what I understand.
Well, I don't know if I'd say guaranteed. I mean, it would depend on the financial health of whoever is gonna pay it, but yes, it's supposed to be, yes.
Okay, is that concerning to you?
Well, not at this moment. I mean, if they don't start paying in the next 5 years, it'll definitely be a concern, but that'll be something that would have to be assessed, annually, basically.
Okay, good. Is there a portion in here for our investments, the investments that we have, or a section in here for any investments that we have?
Well, there would be, but all he had was cash at the end of the year. So that was on page 4.
I thought that we have investments.
No?
Can I ask administration through the chair?
Is, Mayor Deck, members of council, Councilor Harris, is that we have lands held for resale. And so that would be where our investments are.
We have no other investments? Like, we're not investing anywhere else and investing money anywhere else?
Not at this time.
What is DeRuyter Investments paid for then? Isn't that an investment company?
That is a consultant, and council is aware that they've been a consultant with us.
Yeah, oh yeah, no, I know that, I'm just, in, the name in itself, DeRuyter Investments, implies that we are investing money with them. I'm just,
Mayor Deck, members of council, Councilor Harris, that's their business name.
okay. So am I incorrect? We don't invest money anywhere?
The only place you have any money invested is at the bank, but yeah, like the CEO said, that's, could be just the business name.
Okay, well then we'll take care of that in a normal meeting. We have, I've yet to have it, get an explanation on it, but there is an entity of Gibbons Alberta Power Corporation or whatnot. Is that accounted for in here at all?
No, I can't remember the exact name, but I think there was going to be a municipally owned, yeah, but I can't remember if that was the name of it or not.
I
But
think it's Gibbons Alberta Power Corporation or something like that. Could we have an explanation of that?
Farrell would know the name exactly, but it's not included in here.
Mayor Deck, members of council, Councilor Harris is actually, administration has conferred with council that we'd be look at forming a council or a municipally controlled corporation, and it would be based on a utility as be part of the name, but that hasn't been formalized, and it would have to be approved by council before we move forward.
What's Peace Power then? Because I found a corporation that has the name of, I mean, I can look it up right now if you'd like, but it's an entity that residents can go through to receive their utilities.
Mayor Deck, members of council, then that would be a retailer for power that is not owned by the town. That's just the one that is out there, and that's what they operate as.
Have you ever heard of Peace Power?
If I'm aware of, I have not heard of Peace Power. I've heard of North Park Power, which is based out of, I believe they operate out of Thorhild, and that's actually a regional co-op program. And so that's what I know.
If I could,
Yeah.
I've seen Peace Power.
Yeah,
Other
yeah.
clients, yeah.
And I have looked into it, and there are about 50 or 60 municipalities that have independent utilities corporations named after them, and their residents can sign up under the particular municipality, and Gibbons is on there. Are you unaware of it then?
Mayor Deck, members of council, Councilor Harris, yes, I am not aware of that. Is that I'm not aware of that we formed any power company. It's certainly, discussion down the road that we would look at doing something like that, but we do not have one established through our organization.
So is it fraudulent? I mean, Peace Power is an entity. I have looked into it. There is a corporation under the name with the name of Gibbons, as well as Parkland County and Sturgeon County and Medicine Hat and, pardon me, not Medicine Hat, but like I said, about 50 or 60 other power companies that our residents can sign up and obtain their utility services through.
Councilor Harris says I'm not unaware of who they are, and it certainly isn't registered through the town. People can choose the name and put Gibbons in it, just like, Gibbons Auto Body. They can use that as their company name, but I'm not aware of them.
Okay, well, that's alarming. Okay, we'll move on and we'll find out about that at a later date. Is there any counting for the line of credit? Any ins and outs of the line of credit that you look into? Specifics?
Well, not all of them. It would be included in some of our audit sample, but at the end of the year, the amount that's on the financial statements is, reconciled to the line of credit statements.
Okay, so there's, you as our auditor, you don't go through whether or not it be the monthly reconciliation of the lines of credit, ins, outs, what they pay off, what it's used for, that sort of thing?
Not all of them, no. I mean, at the end of the year, it wasn't reconciled, so we had to adjust for that, but.
What do you mean it wasn't?
Well, I
I'm
believe
not
the
an
interest hadn't been recorded, during the year, if I remember correctly.
Okay,
So just like, we're not gonna look at every transaction in the bank account, we're not gonna look at every transaction in the line of credit.
is that regular practice?
Yes, that's very regular practice.
Okay,
If you wanted us to look at every transaction, we'd still be auditing.
okay, next question is, I had sent you, 2 checks with, one from, that we received back in, I think, 2014. And this was regarding the last year's audit, and there was I think it was a write-off to, Landrex for a certain amount of money, and, as well as the difference in checks that we received for payment, first payment of the land sale. Do you have any reporting on the differences in those checks or that information?
What I can tell you is that when we did the audit, we were checking to make sure that they were paying based on that schedule, and that was the case, so.
Okay, well, I provided you a picture of 2 checks, and the, one check, like I said, was from 10 years ago, from Landrex, and there was an amount that was being written off from Landrex that had been on our books for 10 years. And,
I think that amount is still there, actually, it's about $32,000.
yeah,
Yeah, it's my understanding that was gonna be recovered through future, development costs.
okay, but I gave you a picture of a check that we received for about $20,000 back then.
Yeah, I'd have to look back, but I was directed that your communications with me were not necessarily,
Oh, yes, I included all of council at
no,
your
but I
request.
was not directed by council to follow up.
Oh, God. Okay. Well,
Well, okay, so we can't be working for 9 different people, correct?
well, you'd asked me to
Individually.
include all of council in my inquiries.
Yes.
In the email, and I did.
Yes,
Oh, so.
but I was never directed to do anything further with that.
Okay, so are you telling me the rest of council, well, then I will put this to the rest of council. There were 2 checks, one that was recent, the differences, or the difference on the amount that was provided, what I understand, to the auditor for the payment of, one of the payments for the land sale. It differed from the check amount that administration had provided to council by about $20,000, if I recall correctly. Can I ask at least administration about, nobody else knows about this? Because I included all of you in the email.
This is something that happened over 10 years ago before anyone
No,
on this
there's
council.
the check, sir.
No, but the checks themselves and everything else happened previous to anyone on this council. The only person here that knew about any of this through that time was you.
Yes, except
did-
the
what
one
did-
that
what
we
did- what
received
did-
last
what-
September.
What did you do with it 10 years ago?
The one that we received last September.
But what did you do?
How
with
about
it
we go
10
to that,
years ago?
okay, that's fine, we'll leave the one from 10 years ago. What about the one that administration emailed council September of last year?
How does this have anything to do with this
Because in the
auditor's report?
audit last year, the auditor indicated that we received X amount of dollars, I think it was $1.16 million, and the check that Mr. O'Malley sent to all of council, the picture of the check on September 13th last year, if I'm not mistaken, was for a different amount. I had sent that to all of council, as well as the section that I took a screenshot from the auditor's report that indicated the amount that they were reporting. And it differed from the amount on the check, the picture of the check that was sent to all of council last September. We all received that check, the picture of that check. It was different. Now, if none of you cared to know why there was a difference in the amount of money that was received, you better say it right now in front of people on and online. Or Mr. O'Malley can comment.
Mayor Deck, members of council, Councillor Harris, that actually had nothing to do with land recs. That actually had to do with the sale of the land with Heartland Station.
Yes, I'm aware of that.
And
That's what
and
I'm
actually, I believe-
referring to.
Finish, please.
I believe the difference in the check versus the numbers was actually the legal fees that were withheld from the statement and the transaction. And that was the difference between the values. The value was to be at 1.16, and the difference was that less the legal withholdings from, for legal fees.
If I could just add to that, yes, I believe that was the case, because the actual check was $1,144,000 or something. If I go by memory, and that all made sense.
So, is that indicated in the very handy chart that was provided to council that compiled all of the legal fees from the beginning of our term?
Phil,
No, there's
Phil,
$20,000 missing.
Hang on. Phil, the money that was being discussed, is it clean and clear in the audit that it was paid properly and on time?
It was paid in accordance with the agreement, and I remember, exactly the numbers, no, but there was a difference, and I believe, like I said, it was a 1.144, which I think was the difference was the legal fees. But everything made sense in accordance with what you received. I remember looking at the check myself, actually.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on, please.
No,
Yes.
no. Okay, then can I have my question answered? When Councillor Barry requested that all of the legal fees be compiled and presented,
Currently, we are going on
Yeah.
what this special meeting is about, which is
exactly.
the audited
if there
financial
is
report.
legal fees that have been.
You're going into.
Mr. Mayor,
You're going into another.
no, I'm not. You're claiming, there's been claims that that check differs from the amount that the auditor noted in his audit for 2022 that were legal fees. I'm asking if those legal fees were on the chart that was provided to council this year. I mean, this is, if it is, great, let's move on. Yes or no?
Mayor Deck, members of council, I don't have the report in front of me, so I'm not sure if it was included or not, so I'll have to get back to council at a later date.
Okay,
Councillor Barry, did you have something to interject in this conversation?
I just wanted to bring us back to the 2023 audit report.
Okay,
and the
thank you
questions
very
that were
much.
Directly related to that.
thanks, Mom. Okay, we'll move on. When an employee, specifically a director, pardon me, not, when, hang on, I think, let me just find it for a sec. Where the council and the, Mr. O'Malley's pay and the, what page is that? One sec. There we go. The designated officers. I would just like to know how, if one of the designated officers are being paid through their company, how is that reconciled with the auditor?
I'm not sure what your question is.
Is the Director of Corporate Services or the interim Director of Corporate Services not Monique Jeffries? And is she not a designated officer?
Yes, I would be included in there.
Okay, we pay her through her company.
Yeah.
And is that, I mean, these are salaries, right?
Well, not necessarily. There's sometimes people are not considered an employee, right? So the point is that it's included there.
So a designated officer doesn't have to be an employee?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Well, I think that's enough for right now. Are we able to email you if we have any other questions? And I will incorporate, or I will include all of council if I have any other questions. Yes, no?
Well, I think those questions have to come from council as a whole.
Through council as a whole.
Okay, well then I will ask council.
Councillor Kozak.
In your opinion, is the town ran fairly and decently?
That's a loaded question. You know, we're hired to provide an opinion on the financial statements. So that's really goes beyond, you know, what we're hired to do. I mean, we've made some recommendations in the management letter. There's definitely some areas that there could be some things to work on.
Yeah, that was my next.
So, you know, I think, you know, if you were gonna ask somebody if, I forget exactly how you worded that question, but that would be something that an operational review would investigate further, but, you know, there definitely are things, amongst any client that things could be improved. So there are things to work on, for sure.
The only question I have, in the audit, were you able to show receipts for counselor expenses from that particular year? I believe there was a number of them, significant amount missing.
Again, when we look at the audit as a whole, we might look at a few sample of counselor expense claims, but we're not gonna look at everyone. But, you know, if you wanted us to, we could certainly do that. In forming our opinion on the financial statements, that would not necessarily be something that we would look at 100%. But having said that, I have had clients where they've directed us to do that. So if you'd like us to do that, we could go further. You know, I always tell people, shovel the sidewalks if you want us to, but you probably don't want to pay us to shovel sidewalks, so.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, Phil, I've got a couple questions. First off, is there any issues with the way we are doing our reporting that would be against policy, law, or statute?
Are you talking about the financial statements or the internal reporting?
The financial statements.
No, I mean, we would change that before that was a problem.
Okay. Is there an issue with the number of staff we provide to ensure you have the material you need to conduct the audit?
I don't know, hard to answer that question. You know, definitely there's delays. Like I said, again, I think this year, again, there were some extenuating personal circumstances. I'm not sure, you know, I'm not on the ground here. I don't know for sure why some things don't, you know, necessarily happen as fast as maybe we would hope they would. So I'm not really in a place.
I understand there are extenuating circumstances, but we've also got more complex financials than in past years with land
Yes.
sales, with the development of different areas through town. In another client, say, of our size, do they provide you with more assistance? Because what I'm trying to do is make sure our budget is clean and on time. And I need some advice on that, so we can provide it to council, so we can provide it to our employee to say, listen, we need to do this for our next audit.
Yeah, definitely there's, you know, like I think I was thinking about it earlier this week. The accounting for some of these land sales and developments, inventory, you know, it's a little bit more complicated than the run of the mill, you know, than what maybe we've been used to here for many, many years, right? So whether that requires more manpower, I'm not sure, but you know, that could be for sure. So those things are, I would say, you know, if you look at the municipalities in the area that are closer to Gibbons size, those are not, you know, prevalent at places like Bruderheim or Lamont or some of those places, Bonaccord, right? They're not taking on big developments. It'd be more type of things that's happening maybe in Morinville or Stony Plain and those types of places. And they would definitely have larger accounting staff.
Lastly, were you given everything you needed to do the audit properly?
Yeah, at the end of the day, we got what we needed. You know, is that ideal? Anytime that we're, you know, not getting stuff when we get here and we're ready to go and then things, you know, drag out, things are not as efficiently done as they could be, right? So, you know, I'm not trying to just, not really complaining, but I mean, yeah, I mean, ideally we would get stuff when we need to, when we get here. And sometimes that doesn't happen, so.
Thank you very much for your report.
Are we going in camera as well? We are supposed to have an in-camera session without administration.
Not with regards to the audited financial report.
Yes, we are.
No, we aren't.
What? We did it last year. We do it every year.
I'll move acceptance of the 2023 audited financial statement.
All those in favor?
Recorded, please.
All those opposed? Meeting's adjourned.